Today, we're diving into a fascinating story that's unfolding right now in greater Indianapolis. What happens when a huge demographic wave crashes into a market where there just isn't enough housing to go around? Well, you get a perfect storm. And that's exactly what's happening in Indy's senior housing market. Let's get into it.
So what's the engine behind all this? It really boils down to this one number, 31%. That's the projected growth of Indiana's senior population by the year 2050. I mean, think about that. That's a massive, massive shift in the state's demographics. And a change that big is going to make some serious waves in the real estate market.
You know, the source material calls this a demographic tsunami, and I think that just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures the sheer scale of what's happening. We're not talking about a minor trend here. This is a fundamental reshaping of who needs a home and what kind of home they need.
So let's unpack this perfect storm. We're going to break down the different ingredients that are all coming together at the exact same time to create this really unique situation in the Indianapolis market.
And here's the core of it, right? On one side, you have this huge wave of seniors looking for a place to live. And on the other, you have a seriously tight supply of housing that meets their needs. When those two forces collide, you get this incredible pressure on the market, creating a really interesting window for investment.
Okay, so let's start with the most important piece of the puzzle, the people. I mean, this whole thing is being driven by the simple fact that the senior population is growing, and it's growing fast. And look how quickly this is happening. By 2025, which is, basically right now, almost 1 out of every 5 people in the entire state of Indiana will be 65 or older. That's about 1.3 million people. So this isn't some abstract, far-off projection. It's the reality on the ground today. And when you zoom into the details, the numbers get even crazier. We're looking at another 20% growth in that 65-plus group by 2030. And get this, the number of senior renters in the Indy metro area shot up by 52% in just the last 10 years. 52%! In popular suburbs like Carmel, demand is already outpacing supply. And maybe most importantly, the fastest-growing group of all? It's the 85-plus segment, a group that often requires very specific and accessible housing.
All right, so we've established there's this huge, undeniable demand. So what about the supply? What kinds of properties are we even talking about? Because it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all situation.
So the source material breaks it down into 3 main categories. First up, you've got your residential 55-plus condos. Then if you scale up, you're looking at commercial multifamily properties. And for the investors who really want to maximize their returns, there's a third tier, these hybrid redevelopment projects. And what this really shows is that there are multiple entry points into this market. It could be a family buying a single condo for a parent, or it could be a big institutional fund buying a whole apartment complex. Each tier just comes with its own level of risk and its own potential reward.
Okay, we've talked people, we've talked properties. Now, let's talk money. Because why Indianapolis? What makes its numbers stand out from the rest of the country? Well, the financials really tell the story here.
Let's start with this number, 92.1%. That was the peak occupancy rate for what are called active adult communities. Basically, apartment buildings with amenities for seniors. A number that high is a massive sign of just how high the demand is. I mean, these places are practically full with a waiting list.
And you know what happens when demand is high and vacancies are low, right? Rents go up. In the Indy area, rent growth is projected at 3.5% a year. Now that's well above the national average. It's simple economics, really.
So that brings us to the bottom line, the return on investment. This chart shows the capitalization rate, which is just a fancy way of measuring a property's potential profitability. And as you can see, with cap rates in that 7 to 8% range, Indy is outperforming the national average, plain and simple. So when you put all 3 of those pieces together, the high occupancy, the faster rent growth, and the better returns, the picture becomes crystal clear. It's all pointing to an unusually strong and robust market.
All right, for our final section, it's one thing to understand the market, but it's another thing to know how to navigate it. The source material actually lays out a game plan, a kind of blueprint for how to approach this opportunity. Let's check it out.
So here it is, the author's 7-step plan. It really turns a pretty complicated process into a clear, step-by-step roadmap. It all starts with figuring out exactly what you're looking for, then doing a deep dive on the market. A key step is hunting for those off-market deals that nobody else knows about. Then comes the really intense due diligence, building what she calls a financing fortress so you're ready to go. And then, of course, the negotiation, the closing, and optimizing the property. And that really brings us full circle.
This perfect storm in Indianapolis is the result of these three powerful forces all hitting at the same time. That demographic tsunami we talked about, a serious shortage of the right kind of housing, and financial returns that are just plain better than the national average. What's happening in Indianapolis is just a fascinating case study. It's a preview of how these huge population shifts can totally transform a local real estate market. And it leaves us with one big question to think about. As these same demographic changes happen all over the country, which city is next?